I'm very happy to be here and to be addressing quite a distinguished crowd. I was asked to speak to you only yesterday, so I also have to admit that first I can't say no to Hinda when he asks. And second, I believe in dialogue, and I think we don't have enough of it. A constructive dialogue that hopefully will lead to better times. I want to tell you how I'm going to discuss this, because I'm not a women specialist. And actually for many years I didn't believe there should be specific women projects, specific action only directed towards women or only by women. I always believed in the mainstream, but I think lately I've changed my mind. I found the men didn't do very well, so I'm in a process of transition. But still I'm not a women expert. I like the Arab Spring. I have to admit, since the beginning... Do you want us to stand? Okay. Well, I like the Arab Spring. I don't know if I would call it the Arab Spring, because I think it's a real revolution. It's a real change. And an opening for a new world order, especially in the region. So I will be talking about this context. What does it mean to me? Since I didn't do research before I came here, I'm just going to share with you my point of view and my observations of this from the beginning of the year until now, especially. And I will talk about not only the Arab Spring, but the wider context, because I don't think the Arab Spring has happened in isolation of the wider changes in the world. I would look into the challenges that face any social or economic change, and then at the end I will speak what is the role of women. I believe women have an important role to play. It's 50% of the community. So I will not indulge into that at length again, because I'm not the expert. The Arab Spring, I think it's a promise. It's a promise because it's an opportunity, and it depends how the various actors are going to make use of it. But it's a promise for the construction of democracy. It's a promise to unleash fantastic potential. We all lived the reality of this last year. For years, we've only seen countries represented by one person, one face only. And it's like all these millions did not exist. And suddenly, these millions have faces, these millions have ideas, these millions have capacities and potential that would like to unleash. They would like to live up to that potential. And I think this is a major opportunity for the region, which I hope it will really be realized. I know that for a period there's going to be unrest, there are confrontations, there will be blood, there was, and it's extremely sad. Always said freedom doesn't come at a low cost. It's never given on a silver plate. But the fact that the barrier of fear that has been broken so that these people are going out on the street is the key to this change in the region and the key to this revolution. It is the fact that people suddenly speak up for themselves, including women, as we have seen, young people. I don't think it was a surprise. Maybe we haven't been reading the map very well, because like in the Palestinian areas, young people make up like 70% of the community, of the population. That's a major factor for change. And these people have been suffering from major unemployment and a lot of poverty, and not only in the Palestinian territories. So something must have happened. There should have expected some kind of explosion of this energy that had nowhere to go. Now, this Arab revolution, which will go through a transition period of confrontations, of ups and downs, but I believe the change is for real. I don't think there is a road back to previous times where the minority, a very small minority, has imposed its rule and governance on the great, great, great majority. I think there is, I hope I'm right, there is no going back to that. How long will this period of transition take is another matter. We don't know. At what price? Again, we don't know. I think this revolution, one part of it, and the fact that people in their diversity have come up on the street to ask for their simple human rights is a proof of the rich diversity that exists in the region and is a real support to democracy based on pluralism. I don't think we need to be afraid, for example, of fundamentalists taking off and replacing dictatorships. I don't think that will happen. So, this revolution, though, hasn't happened in vacuum. It's not only in the region. Of course, we all know what is happening in the US and even in some European countries. The world has changed. It's not only that there's so much young people in the region, it's the information revolution, which has changed the world. Not only is the power relations have also changed. We know that the superpower is giving way to multilateralism and to emerging powers. The region also, with this revolution, we've seen changes in the geopolitical balance. We've seen changes also in the balance of power. At the regional level, we have seen the emergence of Turkey and Egypt. I mean, the way Egypt have changed its foreign policy was very interesting, and we all lived through the last few months of an administration that is much more sensitive to the needs and to the opinion of the street. Saudi is trying to play its role, and this is sort of dimming the great importance that was given to Iran as an emerging power and which is trying to extend its powers, at least it did to the Mediterranean. So this whole change, what will it lead to? Where are we going from here now? I think this is a major question. Where we're going will depend on how the various actors will play their role. Nothing is guaranteed. And then, what is civil society doing? What is the political decision? Will it be really for democracy, for building structures for democracy? What will the outside powers do? Because there are forces who are still interested in keeping some kind of control over the region, and the best way to keep control is through dictators. You tell them what to do, and they do it. They get the right price for it. Now, these forces are still trying to maintain their control of the region or their influence in the region. Again, will we be able to overcome poverty? Because you can't have real democracy with poverty. I mean, and I know it from our life here among Palestinians, people, when you have 60% of the population living under the poverty line, priority number one, is putting food on the table. Normal, sending the children to school. They're not going to, or at least in our case, trying to pass checkpoints. And by the time you do all this, you can, the day is barely enough, as a matter of fact. The unemployment levels, the opportunity for employment. I mean, and especially for women. I think in the for Palestinian women, women make 11 or 12% of the workforce. Well, that's very, very low. And knowing that there are no jobs out there, actually women don't even go and look for jobs. So it's really a very low percentage of women finding working. Will we be able to create jobs in a proper way? Again, we need economies that function. We need small businesses that really function. And I worked in the UN and other development agencies for years, and we spoke about small, medium-sized enterprises, micro enterprises, and what have you. But in reality, all these projects didn't really make a difference on the ground and create enough sustainable jobs to keep it going. In the Palestinian areas, for example, of course, with occupation, it's very hard to have sustainable development. But I still believe in the small margin that we have, we can still do better. We are doing much better, but still we can do a lot more in economic development. We also have the fundamentalist forces, and we have the traditional forces in society that will also work as obstacles in the face of this promise of democracy. And these are, you can't undermine them. I mean, we are, in a sense, the importance of the family, the importance of the tribe is still important in the culture, but somehow this will stand in the face of of real development and real opening up of the world. I think we are in a transition period, in a transition in the whole Arab world, but especially in the Palestinian areas. And I believe these checkpoints have really pushed us to use the technology and internet in quite an efficient way, and amazing. I mean, it's amazing how many problems it has solved, but we have capacities. Not me, perhaps, but certainly my daughter and my children and this younger generation. So, in addition to the fundamentalists and to the traditional people in our societies that will try to pull us back to the old ways, we have ideology. And I think here I will stop a minute to say this is an extremely dangerous element, because if we fall in ideology, this will blind people and would not allow them to really grow up to their full potential, to really incur development, to really be out there to work, whether in civil society, in a way where we are part of a whole global world. I mean, we can't live in any enclosed societies anymore. So these ideologies, and here we know on the Palestinian side, on the Israeli side, I mean, ideology is certainly a major problem. Well, I don't want to tell what is a problem in Israel, it's for you to say, but from what I read, for example, I just read a report that if the ongoing policies of Israel, which are, too rightist, could bring an end to Israel in 20 years, that's somehow some CIA secret report that was somehow revealed. Anyhow, but you hear people speaking like this, that this ongoing policy is not good for Israel too. So ideology is a danger that we also need to address. How do we move ahead? And I think that we need to move ahead at two levels, either from the bottom up, like real grassroots movements where of course women should be part of that. I mean, if you're looking grassroots, that's 50% of the community. Women should be part of this grassroots to work very seriously in order to have a role in the political decision making, because this is number one. It's the political will, I think, is key to any change. It doesn't have to come only from up to bottom. It is important, we need policies, but also it could come from the grassroots up. And if we have both doing it together, the political will and sufficient work from the grassroots, I think we can really incur real interesting change. I'm not again speaking directly about women, because women are part of the society. But women have, in the ongoing conditions, with the Arab Spring, meaning that it's the people have the right to determine what kind of life they want. That's the message of the Arab Spring. Where democracy is important, that all sectors of the community have the right to speak up and determine, again, what life they want. The women have more than the 50% role. I mean, it's women who are an important factor in bringing up the children and following up the education. I know fathers also are doing a much better job. But still women have this very important role. I believe that women are more conscious about the well-being of the community and have less self-interest. I may be biased here, but that's my observation. And I think they should be invited to be part of governance. They should be invited to be part of the decision-making. And unfortunately, from what I also observe among Palestinian and Israeli women, I don't see them really prominent as women in the decision-making process. Perhaps they didn't decide. They are not determined enough to be there. And we need to find a way to make this happen, so that women are much more present in governance and in the decision-making role. Again, I will speak here on the Palestinian side, and maybe the same applies to at least part of the women on the Israeli side. A lot of investment has been placed to finance women projects, ever since I remember, certainly since Oslo, but even from before that. And Palestinian women have struggled hard, and they always were very active since 48 and with the Exodus and all these refugees. They immediately were very active in social services and humanitarian services, etc. And then, with the coming of the PA, they started to work on right issues, on legislation that will address the rights of women. And there was a lot of work on the organization side, creating networks, projects, organization, and so on. And the sad part is that I think there is a regression in the status of women in the society. Okay, it's part of the poverty especially that hit us in the early year 2000s. It's part of a deepening occupation, of course, but the fact is that all this investment, the result is a regression. And this should not be. I mean, there should be voices that would rebel, that would speak up against this very development. And in Israel, I hear now there are buses where some women are not allowed to be with a man or things like this, the same for some kind of schooling. And again, I've never heard of anything like this in the Israeli society. So the question should be raised on here, what is happening? Are we moving ahead into the 21st century, or are we regressing? So we do have major problems internal that we need to address, so that women who are such an important part of society can really contribute in their proportion. But we also need to be very wary and very aware of all these external forces that don't want really to have democracy in the region. And the only way we can move forward, I think, the key word is democracy. The only way forward is to give people the chance to have a word in the decision-making, in governance, in politics. And that's the only really guarantee for the building of peace in the region.